Ever had a free evening and somehow felt guilty about it? Imagine a person finally getting a free evening after a long week. The dishes are done, the emails are answered, the house is quiet. A warm drink sits on the table. Nothing urgent needs attention. And yet, instead of feeling relaxed, they feel uneasy. A strange thought appears. Shouldn't I be doing something? For many people, rest isn't difficult because they don't have time for it. Rest is difficult because they feel guilty when they try. It's one of the strangest contradictions of modern life. We spend most of our days wishing for a break, but when the break finally arrives, we struggle to enjoy it. Instead of peace, we feel tension. Instead of relief, we feel pressure. Instead of rest, we feel responsibility. And often, we don't even realize why. The story usually begins much earlier than adulthood. Many people grow up receiving praise not for who they are, but for what they accomplish. The child who gets good grades receives attention. The child who behaves perfectly receives approval. The child who works hard receives recognition. Slowly, a quiet equation begins forming in the background of the mind. Achievement equals worth. Productivity equals value. Doing equals deserving. The lesson is rarely taught directly. Nobody sits a child down and says, "Your value depends on your output," but the message can be absorbed anyway. Over time, the brain begins treating productivity like proof of existence. When you're accomplishing something, you feel useful. When you're accomplishing nothing, you start questioning yourself. Years later, this pattern follows people into adulthood. A person finishes work and sits on the couch. Within minutes, their mind starts producing a list: laundry, messages, career goals, house projects, personal development, exercise. Something always seems unfinished. The irony is that the list often grows precisely because the person is exhausted. An exhausted brain struggles to prioritize. Everything feels important. Everything feels urgent. And because everything feels urgent, resting starts to feel irresponsible. The result is a strange emotional experience. The body is sitting still, but the mind is still running. It's like leaving a car parked while keeping the engine revving. From the outside, it looks like rest. From the inside, it feels like work. This is one reason people often finish a weekend feeling surprisingly tired. They may not have been physically active, but mentally, they never stopped performing. They spent the entire time negotiating with themselves, trying to relax, feeling guilty, trying again, feeling guilty again. Many workplaces unintentionally reinforce this pattern. The busiest person is often admired. The person answering emails late at night appears dedicated. The person constantly occupied appears important. Meanwhile, rest becomes invisible. Nobody congratulates someone for taking a healthy break. Nobody applauds an afternoon spent recovering from stress. The message becomes clear. Activity is visible. Recovery is not. So people learn to display busyness even when they desperately need rest. Sometimes this goes so far that being busy becomes part of a person's identity. If someone asks how they're doing, they immediately answer, busy, not because they enjoy it, but because busyness has become evidence that they're productive, valuable, and needed. Without realizing it, they begin wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor. The problem is that the human mind doesn't work like a machine. Machines can run continuously until they break. Humans require cycles: focus and recovery, effort and rest, movement and stillness. When one side disappears, the entire system suffers. Concentration becomes harder. Creativity declines. Patience decreases. Small problems feel larger. Simple decisions feel heavier. Ironically, avoiding rest often makes people less productive, not more. The thing they fear becomes the thing they create. The brain starts sending signals that something is wrong: fatigue, irritability, forgetfulness, lack of motivation. But instead of seeing these signals as requests for recovery, many people interpret them as proof they need to work harder. It's like seeing a fuel warning light and responding by pressing the accelerator. For a while, it might seem to work. Eventually, it doesn't. Another reason people feel guilty while resting is that rest can create silence. And silence allows thoughts to surface. During busy days, constant activity acts like background noise. There is always another task, another notification, another responsibility. But during moments of rest, that noise disappears. The mind suddenly has space. Sometimes that space feels peaceful. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Unfinished worries, doubts, and emotions often become easier to notice when nothing is distracting us. As a result, some people stay busy not because they love productivity, but because they fear what might appear in the quiet. Busyness becomes a shield, a way to avoid difficult thoughts, a way to postpone emotional discomfort. But postponed emotions rarely disappear. They simply wait. This is why genuine rest involves more than stopping activity. It also involves giving yourself permission to stop. That permission sounds simple, yet for many people, it's surprisingly difficult. Permission means accepting that your worth doesn't increase every time you complete a task. Permission means recognizing that recovery is productive. Permission means understanding that rest is not something you earn after becoming perfect, because that moment never arrives. There will always be another email, another goal, another responsibility, another item on the list. If rest depends on finishing everything first, rest never happens. The people who seem healthiest often understand something important. They don't view rest as the reward for productivity. They view rest as part of productivity, just as sleep is part of staying awake, just as breathing in requires breathing out. The two belong together. One makes the other possible. A person who rests without guilt isn't necessarily less ambitious. In many cases, they're simply less willing to sacrifice themselves to endless pressure. They understand that a healthy life cannot be built entirely from effort. It also requires recovery. And maybe that's the real shift. Instead of asking, "Have I done enough to deserve rest?" a better question might be, "What happens if I never allow myself to rest at all?" For most people, the answer is surprisingly clear: exhaustion, resentment, burnout, a life spent constantly running toward the next task. Rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's the thing that makes sustainable productivity possible. And sometimes, the most productive thing a person can do is sit quietly, take a deep breath, and allow themselves to be human for a while.